Rain in Portland doesn't fall, it hangs. It just sits in the air and gets into your lungs and your hair and the seams of your suitcase. And by the time I dragged mine up the walkway of the Little Blue Craftsman on Northeast Klickitat Street, I was soaked through and shaking, but not from the cold. The porch light was off. That was the first thing. I always left the porch light on, even when I was gone for months, because Mr. Whitfield 2 doors down used to walk his old beagle past at 5 in the morning, and he'd told me once that a lit porch made the street feel less lonely, so I always left it on, and now it was off. The second thing was the wind chime. The little brass one my coworker Priya had brought me back from a trip to Jaipur. It wasn't there. The hook where it had hung for 3 years was bare and a little rusted where the chain had rubbed. The third thing was the man. He opened the door before I knocked. He was in his 50s maybe. Gray flannel pajamas, holding a mug that said, "World's okayest dad," and he looked at me through the screen door with the patient confusion of somebody who'd been expecting a Jehovah's Witness instead. "Can I help you?" I tried to make my mouth work. I couldn't stop staring at the entryway behind him. There was a runner I didn't recognize, a coat rack I'd never owned, a pair of children's rain boots, yellow ones with frogs on them, lined up next to a doormat that said, "Alas this mess." "I think there's been a mistake," I said. "This is my house." His face did something complicated. He set the mug down on a little side table I'd never seen before in my entryway, and he opened the screen door an inch, and he said, very gently, "Ma'am, we closed on this house in September." "That's not possible." "I have the paperwork," he said. "I can show you. We bought it from a Miss Spears, Maren Whitcombe and her brother, through a power of attorney. My name is Maren Whitcombe. I'm the only one of me there is. I'd been gone for 11 weeks. I'd been in Munich and then Zurich and then Frankfurt, sitting in conference rooms that smelled like burned coffee, tracing $12 million of skimmed pension fund money through 6 shell companies, and a guy in Liechtenstein who thought he was clever. I'd flown back into PDX that morning on a red-eye that was delayed twice. I'd taken a lift home in the dark because I wanted to surprise my cat sitter. I hadn't even called my mom yet to say I'd landed. And while I was in a glass tower in Frankfurt explaining wire structures to the German federal police, somebody had walked into a title office in Multnomah County and sold the house I'd worked 9 years to buy. Before I tell you what I did next, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me the worst thing somebody in your own family has ever done to you. I read every single one. There are more of us than you think. I didn't scream at the man in my doorway. He wasn't the one who'd done this to me. He was just a retired postal worker named Ron who'd wanted a quieter street for his grandkids. And he was looking at me with the dawning horror of somebody who was beginning to understand he'd been swindled too. He gave me a piece of paper, said they'd put my things in a storage unit out by the airport, that he'd kept the address because something about the whole closing had fell off and he'd wanted to be able to find me if I ever turned up. I thanked him. I don't remember walking back down the porch steps. I remember the rain and the smell of wet cedar and a kid's tricycle on the lawn that wasn't mine. The storage facility was off Marine Drive, one of those orange-doored places under the flight path where every 30 seconds another Alaska Airlines plane comes in low enough you can read the tail number. The clerk made me show ID 3 times. The unit was 142, no climate control, padlocked with a lock I didn't have the key to. The guy cut it off with a bolt cutter and shrugged when I tipped him $20. When I rolled up that door, what hit me first was the smell. Mildew. Wet cardboard. Something sweet and rotten underneath that I couldn't place until I saw the box at the back, the one marked pantry, and realized somebody had packed an open jar of honey and a half bag of flour together with my grandmother's china. The flour had become a colony of something. The honey had welded the cardboard shut. My couch was on its side. They hadn't even wrapped it. There was a long gash down the cushion from where it had dragged across concrete. My books, all of them. My entire library, including the first edition, Annie Dillard, my dad had given me the Christmas before he died, were in trash bags. Not boxes. Black contractor trash bags, tied at the top, sitting in puddles. I opened one. The bottom of the bag was a slurry of pulped paper. And then I found the trunk. It was my grandma's trunk. Cedar, with brass fittings, the one she'd brought up from Galveston when she came to live with us after my grandfather died. Inside it, I'd kept every letter my father ever wrote me when he was deployed in the 90s. There were 43 of them. I'd counted when I was 12 after his funeral. I'd kept them in chronological order in a manila envelope at the bottom of the trunk, underneath my grandma's quilts. The trunk lid had warped from the damp. The quilts were spotted with mold. And the envelope, when I lifted it out, was so soft it came apart in my hands. The letters had fused into a single block of grayish pulp. My father's handwriting had dissolved into the paper and then dissolved out of it. I held what was left of his words to me in two cupped palms, and I watched a piece of it fall onto the concrete floor of Unit 142 with a wet little slap. And that was the moment. That was the second the part of me that still wanted to be somebody's good daughter died. It died on a wet concrete floor under the flight path of an Alaska Airlines 737, coming in from Anchorage, and I felt it go. I didn't cry. I want to say that clearly. I didn't cry there, and I didn't cry later, and I haven't cried about it since. What I did was I sat down on the dirty concrete with my soaked work coat still on, and I opened my laptop on my lap, and I started working. My family has always told a particular story about me at Thanksgiving. They say I'm the one who's good with numbers. They like that one. They like it because it lets them ask me for money in a way that feels like a compliment. Maren is so good with money. Maren is so responsible. Maren will help. My older brother, the one I am about to tell you about, used to introduce me at parties as his sister, the accountant, and I would correct him, and he would laugh and say, "Same thing, isn't it?" And the people at the parties would laugh too because his laugh was the kind that made other people feel rude if they didn't. I am not an accountant. I am a forensic auditor for a private firm that contracts with the Department of Justice and the FBI's white-collar unit. I trace money. I find the money that people who are very good at hiding money think they have hidden. I have testified in 3 federal trials. I have a security clearance. I have software on my laptop that the average civilian is not allowed to own. And my older brother, the crypto genius, the visionary, the future millionaire, had just left a trail through public county records that a first-year intern could have followed with a hangover. His name is Holden. He is 38. He has been about to be a millionaire for 15 years. I pulled up the Multnomah County Recorder's database on my phone hotspot, and I found the power of attorney filing in under 2 minutes. It had been recorded on October 9th. The notary stamp belonged to a woman named Brenda Salazar, working out of a UPS store in Beaverton. On October 9th, I had been in a hotel conference room in Munich at a meeting that had started at 9 in the morning, local time, and run until almost 6 in the evening. I had the badge scan logs. I had the hotel keycard data. I had a selfie I'd sent my mom at lunch, standing in front of a pretzel cart with the Frauenkirche behind me. Time-stamped and geotagged. I pulled the deed of sale next. Recorded October 23rd. Buyer, Ronald and Marlene Pemberton, $895,000, all cash. Closed to First Cascade Title Company. The seller's signature on the deed was my signature. It was a good forgery. Not great. Whoever had done it had gotten the loop on the M right, but they'd flattened the W in a way I never did, and the date underneath was in handwriting that wasn't mine at all. It was Holden's. I'd recognize his ugly little capital T's anywhere. He used to forge our mother's signature on permission slips in middle school. He never got better at it. He just got bolder. I closed the laptop. I sat on the concrete for another minute, and I listened to a plane come in over the unit, and I waited for the rage. It didn't come. What came was something colder and quieter and a lot more useful. I locked the unit back up. I told the clerk I'd be back in the morning to deal with it, and I drove my rental car to a Sherry's off the freeway and ordered black coffee and a side of hash browns I never touched, and I called my mother. She picked up on the 4th ring. She always lets it ring a couple of times to make you feel like she's busy. She wasn't busy. She was in her kitchen. I could hear the Today Show in the background. "Maren, honey, you're home?" "Mom, I'm at a Sherry's. The house is gone." There was a pause. Not a startled pause. A measuring pause. The pause of somebody figuring out how much you already know. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, and the saccharine in her voice could have given a diabetic a coma. "Don't be dramatic. Holden and your father and I, we had a long talk about this in August. The house was a family asset. We made a decision together, as a family, and you weren't here to weigh in, but you would have agreed. If you've been here, you've always been so reasonable. The house was in my name. I bought it. I paid every mortgage payment for 9 years. You have not contributed a dollar to it. You know your brother's been struggling, Maren. The crypto thing didn't work out the way he hoped, and then the NFT business, and now he's pivoting to AI. He's so excited about it. He has a real vision this time, and he just needed some startup capital. You have so much. You have everything. You don't even have children. What do you need a 4-bedroom house for? You're never even there." "Mom, you sold my house." "We facilitated a sale," she said, and I heard her sip her coffee, and I understood for the first time in my entire life that my mother was not a woman who had been manipulated by her son. My mother was the architect. "Holden is going to pay you back when his returns come in. He's projecting a 40% return by spring. You'll get your money back with interest. Honestly, sweetheart, you should be thanking us. We've made you an investor." You forged my signature on a deed. Don't use words like that, Maren. Don't be ugly. This is your family. It's a felony, Mom. Oh, stop. You sound like a television show. Your brother needs you. He has a fiancée now. A lovely girl. Her name's Kaylee. She's a Pilates now. A lovely girl. Her name's Kaylee. She's a Pilates instructor, and they're trying to start a life. And here you are, 31 years old, no husband, no children, running around Germany, chasing criminals like it's some kind of game. Do you have any idea how that looks? Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is for me at the club? My daughter, the spinster cop. Meanwhile, your brother is trying to build something. He is trying to be somebody, and you want to take that from him because you're greedy. Greedy. I had paid off her car in 2021. I had paid for the roof on the house in Lake Oswego in 2022. I had wired her $4,000 every month for the last 3 years to cover what she called the gap between my father's pension and her actual needs. And I was greedy. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I sat in the booth and I watched the steam come off my coffee for what might have been a long time, and then I called my brother. He answered on speaker. I could hear forks on plates and a woman laughing somewhere nearby. Marbear, he said. He hadn't called me that since I was 7, and I had hated it then too. I heard you were back. Listen, before you go off the deep end, just hear me out. I did you a favor. The market is hot. Real estate in Portland is going to correct. Everyone's saying it. I got you out at the top. You should be sending me a thank you note. You forged my name. I executed our family's plan. There was no plan, Holden. You weren't here, Maren. You're never here. You left. You went off to be a fancy little number cruncher in Europe, and you left us, and you let that house just sit there, 4 bedrooms, just sitting there empty, while I'm trying to build something. Do you have any idea how disrespectful that is? To have everything and just let it rot? There's a thing that happens in the brains of people who steal from their families. I see it all the time at work. There's a clinical term for it, but I won't bore you with it. The simple version is, they cannot survive in a world where they are the bad guy, so they rewrite the world. They rewrite you. In Holden's head, by the time he forged that signature, I wasn't his sister anymore. I was a hoarder. I was a thief. I was the one who had stolen his rightful inheritance by working harder than he did, and by taking the house. By setting himself up with $895,000 of my money, he wasn't a criminal. He was correcting a cosmic accounting error. He was Robin Hood. He was the hero of his own little movie. The fact that the movie was a lie didn't matter to him at all. Where is the money, Holden? It's deployed. Deployed where? In positions. In the strategy. Look, I'm not going to explain Web3 to a CPA. When the next cycle hits, you'll get yours. Probably late spring. Maybe summer. Just sit tight and try not to ruin my life in the meantime, okay? I gotta go. We're at ringside. I'll call you tomorrow. He hung up before I could answer. I sat in the booth and I looked at my phone and I thought about Ringside Steakhouse, the old Portland one on West Burnside, the one with the dark wood and the gimlets and the bone-in ribeye that was $68 before tax. The one my father had taken me to for my college graduation. He had picked up the check that night with his veteran's disability money, and he had told me he was prouder of me than of anything he'd ever done in his life. That was where my brother was eating right now, with my money. I drank a sip of the coffee. It had gone cold. I left a 20 on the table for the hash browns I never touched, and I walked back out to the rental car and I sat in the driver's seat in the Sherry's parking lot, and I put my hands on the steering wheel, and I waited until they stopped shaking. Then I got to work. I drove to a 24-hour Kinko's on Sandy Boulevard. I bought a coffee from the vending machine and I sat at the rental station and I opened a fresh document and I started building a case file the way I'd build one at work. Tab 1. Identity. My passport scans, my flight manifests from Lufthansa and Delta, my hotel folios from the Bayerischer Hof and the Park Hyatt Zurich, my badge logs from the meetings I'd attended. A clean, time-stamped chain of evidence proving I had been 6,000 miles away on October 9th and October 23rd. Tab 2. The forgery. High-resolution scans of my actual signature from my driver's license, my passport, 3 years of bank documents, side by side with the forged deed. Anyone with eyes could see it. A handwriting analyst would have a field day. Tab 3 was the fun one. The money. Holden had told me it was deployed. Holden had told me it was in positions. Holden was, and has always been, an idiot. I ran his social. I co-signed his first auto loan when he was 22, and I was 18. And I had memorized the number out of pure paranoia about what he might do with my information. The credit report came back in under a minute, and it told me everything. He had not put my money into any kind of investment. He had not bought any positions. He had moved chunks of it into a Coinbase account, converted some to USDC, sent it to a wallet, and then spent it. Almost all of it. In the 11 weeks I'd been gone. I tracked the spending. The blockchain is a public ledger. I have tools that turn wallet addresses into shopping receipts. $117,000 to a Mercedes dealership in Wilsonville. A G-Wagon. Of course it was a G-Wagon. $41,000 to a jeweler on Northwest 23rd. I pulled the dealer's invoice off a sloppy paper trail he'd left in a screenshot and a public Instagram tag. 3-stone diamond ring. Center stone, 2.5 carats. The Pilates instructor. $26,000 to a luxury travel agency in Lake Oswego. 5-night stay at a resort in Turks and Caicos for 4. The fourth person was my mother. My father was no longer alive, so the fourth person on the booking was just my mother. They had used my house money to buy themselves a vacation as a family of 3, plus a Pilates instructor. There was more. There was always more. A Rolex. $6,000 of furniture. A prepaid wedding photographer. He was burning through $800,000 like it was Monopoly money, because in his head, it had never been real. I built it all out. Receipts, blockchain trace, dealer records, public Instagram tags he had stupidly posted because he could not resist showing off. I made a single PDF. I named it Whitcombe PFI. I named it WH evidence package. I encrypted it and I emailed a copy to myself and to my work address and to a friend I trusted at the bureau who I knew would keep his mouth shut. Then I burned a copy to a thumb drive and I burned a second copy onto a CD because old habits die hard. It was 4 a.m. I drove to a Denny's and I ate eggs and I waited for sunrise. At 7, I called my supervisor and told her I was taking the rest of the week. She didn't ask why. She has known me a long time. At 8:30, I walked into the Portland Police Bureau Central Precinct downtown. I asked for the financial crimes detective on duty. I introduced myself by my full title. I put the binder on his desk. The detective's name was Ramirez, and he looked at me like he was waiting for me to be wrong, and then he opened the binder, and by the 3rd page, he was on the phone. And by the 5th page, he was asking me to please come back to his office and start from the beginning. I told him the beginning. I told him I had reason to believe my brother was sitting down to a celebratory dinner at Ringside Steakhouse on West Burnside that very evening, because that's what my brother did every Friday, and because his Instagram had a story up an hour earlier of his fiancée holding up a reservation card. I told him I would like to be there when the arrest happened. Ramirez looked at me for a long beat. Then he said, "Ma'am, that's not really how we do things." I said, "Detective, I have run financial crime takedowns on 3 continents. I know exactly how you do things. I'm telling you, I want to be in the dining room when you walk in. I won't say a word to him before you do. I just want him to see me. I've earned that." He thought about it. He looked at the binder. He looked at me. He said, "Be there at 7:30. Sit at the bar. Don't approach the table." The rain had stopped by the evening. Portland gets that sometimes in November, those weird gold hours after a wet day when everything smells like clean stone. I went back to my hotel, and I showered, and I put on the only nice clothes I had with me, a black sweater and dark jeans, no makeup, nothing fancy. The truth doesn't need to wear lipstick. I drove down to Burnside, and I parked 2 blocks away, and I walked. Ringside hasn't changed in 40 years. Dark red booths, dim sconces, the smell of butter and char. I gave the hostess my father's last name, said I was waiting for someone at the bar, and I sat down at the corner stool that had the best sight line to the dining room. And there they were. Back booth. My brother in a new sport coat that didn't fit him in the shoulders. The fiancé, who really was lovely looking in a glossy sort of way, leaning into him. My mother in pearls. They were laughing. There was a bottle of Camus on the table. They were halfway through ribeyes. I ordered a club soda. I didn't drink it. I just watched. At 7:51, Detective Ramirez walked in with 2 uniformed officers and a woman from the DA's office. They didn't make a scene. They walked straight to the booth. The dining room got that particular kind of quiet that happens when 100 people simultaneously decide to pretend they're not watching something. I slid off the stool and I walked over. My brother saw me before he saw the badge. His face did 3 things in 2 seconds. Surprise. Relief, because he thought for 1 stupid second I had come to apologize. And then the dawning understanding. He saw the officer. He saw the woman with the folder. He saw me. He stood up and dropped his fork on his plate with a clatter that was very loud. "Maren, what is this? Mom, what is this?" My mother turned to the officer with the operatic outrage she'd been rehearsing her whole life. What is the meaning of this? We are eating. This is a private family dinner. You cannot just— Ma'am, Detective Ramirez said very calmly. Holden Whitcombe, you're under arrest for forgery in the first degree, aggravated theft in the first degree, identity theft, and felony fraud against a financial institution. You have the right to remain silent. Holden's face went the color of old milk. The fiancé, Kaylee, looked at him and then at me and then at the ring on her hand and then back at him. And I watched something dawn on her face that I have seen on the faces of a lot of women, and I felt sorry for her for about 3 seconds. Holden, she said, what is happening? You told me the money was from your fund. Sweetie, this is a misunderstanding. He sold my house, I said to her. The first words I'd spoken to any of them, while I was working in Germany, the ring on your finger was paid for with the equity of my home. I'm so sorry. She looked at the ring. She didn't take it off, not right then. But I saw her hand twitch in a way I'll remember for a long time. My mother stood up. She started loud. She called me a viper. She called me a Judas. She accused me of doing this for attention. When the dining room didn't rally to her side, she switched modes. She clutched her chest. She gasped. She slumped sideways against the booth. My heart. Oh God, my heart. You've killed me, Maren. You've killed your own mother. I leaned down. I looked at her face. Her color was fine. Her breathing was steady. The hand clutching her chest was the same hand that had been holding a wine glass 30 seconds earlier, and there was no tremor in it. Mom, I said quietly, so only she could hear, I'm the one who paid for your cardiology workup at OHSU in June. I have your stress test results in my email. Your heart is the strongest part of you. Get up. She opened one eye and looked at me. I watched her recalculate. I watched her understand that I was not the daughter she had been managing for 31 years anymore. She sat up. She straightened her pearls. She did not say another word as they took my brother out in cuffs, past the diners who weren't pretending anymore, past the maitre d' who had the good grace to look at the floor, past the front door and into the cold. I paid their dinner bill on my way out, $842. I tipped the waiter 25% because none of this was his fault. I kept the receipt. 48 hours later, my father, my stepfather, technically, my mother, had remarried 2 years after my dad died, and the man's name was Glenn, sent me a letter through his lawyer. The letter said that the down payment on my house, which my mother had given me in 2015, had actually been a family investment, and that they would be willing to decline to pursue further legal action against me if I dropped the charges against my brother and paid them $400,000 within 30 days. I called Glenn directly. I told him that the down payment had been $22,000, that I had a notarized gift letter from my mother filed with my mortgage paperwork from 2015, in which she swore under penalty of perjury that the money was a gift and not a loan, and that if he wanted to characterize it differently now, in 2025, in a civil action, he would be admitting to federal mortgage fraud. I told him the statute of limitations on that was 10 years and we were inside it. Glenn did not respond. The letter was never followed up on. The lawsuit was never filed. Holden took a plea, 8 years with a chance of parole at 5. The money that wasn't already spent, about $320,000, was returned through restitution. The G-Wagon went back. The Rolex went back. The ring did not, because Kaylee had pawned it on a Tuesday afternoon 2 weeks after the arrest and used the money to fly home to her parents in Boise. And honestly, good for her. My mother sold her house in Lake Oswego and moved to Arizona with Glenn. We don't speak. She sent a card at Christmas last year. I didn't open it. I put it in a drawer and then I forgot which drawer. The Pembertons, Ron and Marlene, didn't lose a dime. First, Cascade Title's insurance underwriter covered the loss the way title insurance is supposed to, and the way most people don't realize it does. And they pursued my brother for recovery as part of his restitution. The notary, Brenda Salazar, lost her commission and pleaded down to a misdemeanor. I sold the house to the Pembertons a second time, this time legally, for the same price, and I used the money to buy a smaller place in an old building in the Pearl District. It's a 2-bedroom on the 7th floor. There's no yard. There's no garage. There's nowhere for anyone to hide anything. The porch light, which is actually a hallway sconce, stays on all night. If you've ever loved someone who treated your love like an ATM, if you've ever been the responsible one and watched your family punish you for it, if you've ever had to choose between being a good daughter and being a free woman, you already know what I'm going to say. The price of getting out is high. I paid it. I would pay it again. Subscribe if you've been there. You're not alone here. were not as rare as they want us to think. I think about that storage unit a lot. Not the house, not the courtroom, not even the dinner at Ringside. The storage unit. Because that was the moment I understood that what my family did to me wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't even really about money. It was about a story they had been telling themselves about who I was supposed to be for them. And the day I stopped agreeing to be that person was the day everything fell apart, on their side and on mine both. Here's what I have learned. People do not start out forging their sister's name on a deed. They start out asking for $20 they don't pay back. Then $200. Then a roof. Then a car. And every time you say yes, every time you smooth it over, every time you decide that keeping the peace is worth a little of your own bone, you are not being kind. You are training them. You are teaching them that the cost of taking from you is zero. My brother Holden did not become the man who sold my house in a single afternoon. He became him slowly, over 38 years, and I helped build him. I helped build him every time I said, "It's fine," every time I covered for him at Thanksgiving, every time I sent my mother $4,000 and pretended it was a gift. Cause and effect doesn't care about your intentions. It just runs. I am not saying I deserved what happened. Nobody deserves it. What I am saying is that the people who love you correctly will never ask you to choose between your dignity and their comfort. If somebody is asking you to make that trade, look at them clearly, even if they raised you, even if they share your last name. Especially then, there's a kind of courage that gets a lot of attention. The loud kind. The standing on the table kind. That is not the kind that saved me. What saved me was a colder thing, a quieter thing. It was the willingness to sit on a wet concrete floor with my father's destroyed letters in my hands and decide that I was not going to spend the rest of my life paying for somebody else's refusal to grow up. That is not bitterness. That is not revenge. That is the only honest love I have ever shown myself. If you are reading this and there is somebody in your life who has been treating your kindness like a credit line, I want you to know two things. First, you are not crazy for noticing. Second, walking away from them is not the end of your family. It might be the beginning of the only real one you'll ever have, the one you build out of the people who showed up when nothing was in it for them. The price of that life is steep. I will not pretend otherwise, but I have been on both sides of it now, and I can tell you which side I can sleep on.